Okay. So we do have Paul on the phone, so with Leah dialing in a second, I think we can, at the very least, we can call to order the meeting since we do have a quorum. So it's 7:40, and I am calling the meeting to order. Welcome everyone to meeting of the VMA Election Committee. Our election season is well underway. I hope you've been seeing the communications from us. Things have been going very well thus far. Niles can double check my dates on this, but we heard from a tech vendor, and you probably saw an email from us. The ballots went out Monday.
Yes, correct. They were put in the mail on Monday.
So hopefully everyone should start seeing them in their mailboxes soon. If you haven't seen them, if you have a question about the tracking numbers on it, if potentially someone in your household who was supposed to have gotten a ballot didn't get a ballot, please reach out to the committee, reach out to the village office, and we will work to correct that as quickly as humanly possible to make sure everyone gets their ballots in plenty of time to get them mailed back. Don't forget the deadline for ballots to arrive is May 23rd at 5 p.m. That's the only deadline. We don't have a mailing deadline this year like we had in previous years. So it is just a received by deadline on May 23rd. On election day, May 10th, from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. on the sidewalk out in front of the village office, or inside if we wind up with some inclement weather, we will have a drop box available for people to drop off ballots, specifically ballots in their ballot envelopes. You won't be able to just drop off a loose ballot. It has to be in the envelope. But ballots in their ballot envelopes that are dropped off will be conveyed up to the election vendor. I think we're working on exactly what that's going to look like, but they will be securely conveyed up to the election vendor in plenty of time. Or alternatively, on May 10th at the table, we will have availability. If you have lost your ballot, if your ballot's been damaged, if you've lost the ballot envelope, or there's an issue, you can come to the table and we will work with you at the table to get a new ballot mailed to you, either mailed or overnighted, so that way we can get it over to you and you'll have plenty of time to get it returned then within the 13 days between then and the ballot receipt deadline. So that will be available evening of May 10th. If before May 10th, your ballot is lost, your ballot is damaged, an issue pops up, somebody spills something on it, etc., you don't have to wait until the 10th. You can reach out to the committee, you can reach out to the office, and we'll get you one sent over sooner and cancel out the old ballots.
George, how are you doing the staffing on May 10th?
That's one of the agenda items we have tonight, and I think we'll talk through having how many people we want to have and who wants to volunteer to be doing what. But I think we'll have some combination of us and working at the table, some working with people as they drop things off in the box, and some people working with anyone who might have an issue where we need to take down their names and send those names over to the election vendor.
Okay. Thank you.
So, the last one I will put out the pitch for is we had our candidate forum earlier this month. The recording of that is available on the election page.
The election page and on the village's YouTube channel. So you can just, if you search Village of Martin's Editions in YouTube, you can also find it that way too.
Perfect. Okay. I think that's everything I had on kind of my opening statement. So it's 7:44 and I wanted to open up a period for resident comments. Any residents who wish to comment, either raise your hand and Niles will unmute you, or you can raise your hand in your video screen and we will notice it and Niles can unmute you.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Susan?
Hi. Thank you. I think the candidate forum was really great. You all did a lot of work, and I think it paid off, and it was really interesting. And thank you for organizing all the many questions you got into smaller clumps of questions and such. I was interested in the agenda for today. The topic about curing and counting ballots and such. I was looking, there was nothing online, or did I miss it, that was like an agenda item where you can kind of read about it ahead of time? Like,
You mean like the actual copy of the procedures?
yeah,
No, we didn't have anything posted online ahead of time.
okay. Because I'm always very, there's been a lot of discussion and energy around all of these topics this year, probably a little more than anyone needs in general, but we do have a lot of residents with good ideas, and whenever that does become available, I'd love to have, just see what it says and potentially see how we can, see what insights there are among us too, as we all discuss it and think about it. Because your committee's thinking about it, but I think residents are very interested in it too. So as soon as it becomes available, feel free to post it somewhere where we can see it or whatever. And other than that, thank you. I think it's going to be really interesting, and we're all excited about. And I just was curious on the day of the election if you're going to have people giving out free ice cream and all the little free things they give that are really nice. It kind of like makes you. It's a selling point for the young people, so to speak, to go. So I was just kind of curious if they're going to do that sort of thing again or not. All the little tables and such, and the artists. Sometimes there's art like Bernice Duval, and some people maybe put out their little postcards. Peggy Eastman has some stuff, whatever. And I didn't know if you can have an art table, WSSC, and the ice cream. I was just kind of curious. That's all. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Susan. I can answer a little bit. Yeah, we'll make things available. I think the plan was for the counting procedures we'll discuss. We'll probably say we're looking at something, and then it'll be available before it gets sent to the council for their review and sign off on the updates to last year's vote counting procedures. I think that will be available online. Plenty of opportunity to comment before the council discusses it at whatever their next meeting would be.
That'll be May. I said the wrong thing in an email, so I want to make sure I say this right. It's May 12th will be their meeting, because they also have to adopt the budget, and it has to be before May 15th. So the council meeting will be May 12th.
Thank you. As for day of, I can say I don't know of any plans to do anything. I think that is something the Community Engagement Committee has discussed a little bit. I think the only thing I have discussed was discussing briefly with Niles whether or not we can get any I voted stickers for people who are dropping their ballots off day of.
And we do have some I voted stickers in the office, so we can maybe have that as a little thing. As for the question, Keith and I had discussed this a little bit, whether to do something. He brought up doing something. At the last council meeting, there was a little bit of a discussion about whether, how big to do something, or whether make it small or big or whatever. And then a couple of residents commented on the idea of maybe moving that until after the election season, but, maybe still doing something, sort of later, but all of that is to be determined a little bit, because there hasn't been a full discussion there. That's sort of the summation at this point.
Okay. Any other resident comments? Okay. Seeing no other hands, I think we will move into committee business. First up on the agenda, I believe. Sorry, I'm trying to multi-screen on my phone to have the agenda in front of me. I believe the next thing up on our agenda is approval of meeting minutes from the past 2 meetings. I think for my fellow committee members, if you have had a chance to review those, we want to try and get those approved as a committee, so that way we get them posted on our page, so we have record keeping. I know we could have discussed doing this administratively, but that hasn't fully come together. So, having said that, our last 2 sets of meeting minutes, did anyone have any issues, potential changes, proposed edits, anything like that, or are we good to vote and approve those minutes to put them up on the page?
Good to go.
I had no changes.
Okay. So I move that we approve the meeting minutes for our February and March meeting minutes.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Perfect. Okay. Next up, we have discussion of the voter roll update. I know we had our committee voted through, approved, and said, okay, here's the list that we sent over to the vendor for the purposes of mailing out the ballots. I know it's out. We have the approved process. I think Niles, I wanted to kind of rely on you on if we've had any. I know I saw at least one change that came through to the committee inbox. Have there been any other changes, notifications, requests, anything you've heard from anyone about other potential events?
There's not been yet. I did, as a sort of knowledge thing, I know a couple of new residents to the village who came to our attention over the last couple of days, and so they are like moving in and things like that, so we are sort of reaching out to them directly to sort of say, hey, just so you know, welcome to the neighborhood. Here's the information, and if you'd like to receive ballots, here's the information to do that. So I know there'll probably be a couple more fairly soon.
Okay. I assume them moving in, we had somebody moving
out. So what that means is, in a couple of cases, what that means is that we will keep track of that and say, when we get to the final, the May 10th date, I think the best way of tracking this is to say these are the people who've moved out since the election period started, and then we can indicate, that these people are no longer qualified to vote in the village, and then they can be taken off at that point. But I can send an email to the committee that has all of that information.
Okay, perfect. Because I think the process for this that the council approved that we had discussed in our previous thing, I think for deeming it not qualified and canceling things, we do technically need an administrative committee vote. And
right.
So I think it'll just be one where we'll want to do it in advance of.
Right. Exactly.
Maybe like sending it around the 9th so that way we can have it done so we can sign and certify on the 10th.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And lock it in and just vote and say, okay, yeah, they've moved out.
Yeah.
Etc. Okay, perfect. Any other issues, questions, anything that anyone has spotted or would like to raise relating to updates to the voter roll? Okay. If you have anything, just obviously share it around with the committee. I think as ballots start arriving in the next few days, that might be one where we will start hearing some stuff of people who should have received a ballot but didn't, or a ballot showed up at their house for someone who doesn't live there, etc. And I'm sure we'll have some updates as ballots start coming in. And as was discussed at the most recent council meeting, I think we're now getting close, now the ballots are getting out, we'll start including some additional messaging in the Friday roundups and 1 or 2 standalone emails reminding people of the steps that they can go through if they want to be added to the roll or check their status on the roll, or make any updates to their status on the roll. I think we'll start building that into some of our weekend and monthly newsletter messaging now that people are starting to get their ballots. Okay. If there's nothing else on that, then I think we move on to vote counting procedures and the ballot curing procedure stuff. I know I sent something around a little earlier today that was an update of the process we used last year. I think we want to try and discuss, get something squared away and sent up to the council so that they can give it their blessing. Again, it's not really a new thing. It's just kind of a codification of the existing rules. It's just writing them down so that we've got something in front of us to follow. So the council's not really passing things so much as just it's a public blessing that we have accurately captured how a lot of this stuff happens. I can speak, last year, as you saw from the edits, all the edits I really made were either updating dates or building in the steps that we have this year related to ballot curing that wasn't necessarily in there last year. I think, other than that, if anyone dialed in for the process last year, I think it worked really well. It went pretty smoothly. It went faster than we thought it was going to. Electex machines work pretty well on that front. Having it as a Zoom call does mean that we have designated observers who are the only ones who are allowed to raise objections. I think last year of the 6 people running, I think it was 5 people designated themselves as an observer and 1 had a conflict and so designated someone. But then the ability of anyone else from the village who wants to zoom in and watch, I can attest it's not the most thrilling process. It's watching people feed envelopes into a machine, but if that floats your boat, then great. The one other big change is I think this year it's going to be, obviously because of the curing process, it's going to have to be 2 nights that week. We're going to have to gather Monday to accept and make decisions on whether or not ballots can be cured, and then that gives us, that's Monday the 23rd, the 24th is, and the 25th is the day we spend curing, which is the 24 hours established in the plan, and then we'll reconvene evening of the 25th for counting. So we wind up with 2 separate adjudication sessions, because Monday night is where we adjudicate issues related to the ballot envelopes. Wednesday, our adjudication is all related to issues on the ballot. So, for example, like last year, I think the only ballot we had to make a decision on, and I'd have to check the records on this, I think there was only 1 ballot we had to make a decision on, then that was because I think whiteout had been spilled on the ballot, so the machine might have read it, might not have, but Electech flagged it, pulled it for us, held it up, we look at it and say, yep, that looks like 1 vote for and another vote for okay, we'll write that in and add that to the totals. So I have just talked a lot. Anyone have any thoughts on the vote counting procedure, the curing procedure stuff we laid out? Anything you want to see incorporated, edits, new approaches? Okay. I know Naomi had sent around some thoughts a little earlier this evening. I admit I haven't gotten all the way through them yet, but I think they were mostly to the sample report at the end that we fill out that I really had just copied over last year. I think there were no changes from the one from last year, and that was based almost entirely on the one from 2020. I think she had mentioned a couple of changes. I'm sure that's stuff we can incorporate and circulate via email before we bounce it over to the council, because I think it's all just, do we include, I know she had flagged a couple of things for inclusion, like the number of ballots that are wind up being not cured or undervotes and things like that, and I'm sure that's something we can smooth out the final language. I think in line with the previous ones, I don't know if it's in the template, but last year I think we reported the total number of ballots envelopes that were disqualified. That makes sense to me. I think we'll want to put in the relevant information for people so that way they can see kind of the stats of how many envelopes we got back, and front and center kind of make sure the voting totals are front and center, so that's really the big thing I'm sure most people are opening that up to find. The ballot curing stuff, I don't know if anyone had any thoughts. I mostly mirrored it on the voter roll update process, where it's the 24 hours, where I think it's any envelopes requiring curing within the guidance of the election plan. Niles, I know we've got the village directory, but we also have, not the directory, but kind of the
right.
list of
Our
people contacted?
Right, our database. So Constant Contact, which is one of the main resources we use for this, has people's cell phone numbers, people's emails, even for those who don't normally like put that stuff in the directory, we have that for. So it's a very small number that we don't have at least some form of contact for. And so, which I think literally is now 3 people who didn't provide us an email address or a phone number. But even that, I think we have a phone number for everyone. So.
Okay. Yeah, and so it's basically we call and email them if we've got both, and then do at least one follow up. Small bit of timing. I think I had flagged. We get envelopes as part of our public session, getting the envelopes and them holding them and saying, okay, this one is non-conforming because of X. We make a decision as a committee. We vote and say, that can be cured, that can't be cured. Okay? But not getting the names from Electech until after the public session, obviously. I think we don't want to be, calling out during the thing, oh, John Doe, the envelope is wrong, etc. Kind of thing. So I think I flagged that will happen after public session. And then for curing the ballots, I think the process is I drafted it and envisioned it, basically tries to leave us maximum flexibility. Because I think some of it will be, if someone didn't write their name and address on it, then we can just hold up get the image from Electech and say, is that your signature? Great. Okay, well, we can deem that curing. But also, potentially, if the only other one I could think of for curing where we might want to facilitate directly them talking to Electech was the rules provide the envelope has to be sealed. If somehow the envelope has come unsealed, they might want to speak directly to Electech so they can attest. Electech can take out the ballot and say, does this look like what your ballot was of who you intended to vote for? So that way, that might not be something they want to be doing through the committee, so that way they can, to whatever extent possible, they can preserve the secrecy of the ballot. I know some of that goes out the window once we get into ballot curing, but I wanted to try and leave as much flexibility as possible for us to try and come up with reasonable solutions for curing where it's allowed for under the rules. And then the last one I flagged just for everyone is on vote counting night. So we'll make decisions on, okay, we tried to cure these 5 envelopes. These 4, we were able to reach out to people. We did this. Are we approving and saying add this to the stack? Electech then opens all the envelopes, feeds it in, gives us preliminary numbers. And then after we get the initial numbers, I think is when public session ends, because then Electech starts doing not a recount, but like an audit or I forget the exact terminology they used last year, but it's basically where they verify.
I would say it's best to refer to it as a verification process. They go through and make sure that there was no errors or anything on what they did.
But that part doesn't happen during the public session, and after that is completed, then they send us the finalized official tally, and then we need to vote as a committee to certify the results after we get that. If there's anything outstanding, we deal with it then, but that comes after the end of the public session. Any other thoughts, potential changes? Is everyone generally good with the draft as written to start sending it up to the council?
No.
Eric, okay. Okay, excellent. We can make the kind of last remaining edits, circulate it, everyone get a sign off on it, and then we can get it over to the council so that way they can get it posted in advance of the meeting, so that way if anyone has any additional comments. But we'll make sure to include some of the messaging probably once we get to election day for people to remind them that they are eligible to attend the vote counting session. They don't it's not just the candidate named observers. They're the only ones allowed to raise objections during the process at that time, but letting people know that they have the opportunity to attend if they are so inclined. Okay. Next up, we have May 10th logistical planning. So, Paul, you brought this up a little earlier. I think this is just talking through. I wanted to talk through with everyone thoughts on day of staffing, what steps we're going to need to do, who's available to support and take care of things, and what some of those considerations are. So, first thing I wanted to do is ask who is available on the 10th. I know we're staffing the box from 5 to 8, and there's probably a little bit of pre-work that's going to happen. Somebody's going to have to get down there a little early to work with Niles. But so who is available? I know Naomi has talked in the past about she might be available. So.
I'm available. But how many do you need? You need more than 3 people?
It depends on if we might want to divvy up the time a little bit. Like if somebody doesn't want to be sitting at the table for the full 3 hours, and I think it might be good to have as many of us as are available. Also, just so that way, if someone needs to take a break, walk over, and grab a snack from something, or go grab a bottle of water, etc. So I think if whoever we have available who's eligible to get there, I think that would be helpful. We can coordinate exact kind of day of schedules over the next 2 weeks, week and a half, to figure out who wants to do what part. But it's good to know. It sounds like people are generally available. I'm available to get down there a little early because I know we'll need to do the voter roll certification, and I'm sure getting out the box set up. I know Niles, we have some of the signs and stuff available that we'll want to get all that squared away in advance.
Yeah. George, I think a duty roster would be helpful. And
Yes.
then you guarantee that you're going to have people there. Have a duty roster for early arrival, and then maybe a duty roster for each hour, for that matter, or whatever.
Yeah.
So,
I agree. I think that would be helpful because I was trying to mentally put one together and back of envelope. There's some setup tasks, and then minimum one person manning the box, and at least one person taking notes for people who require new ballots, and then one person just to help across the two if either one's getting swamped. I don't think the box is going to be super difficult, other than just watching and helping people understand that you can't drop just a plain ballot in the box. It has to be in its envelope.
Yeah.
So I think it's probably 3 people, and then I think that makes sense to maybe divvy it out by either by hour or by 5 to 6:30, and then 6:30 to 8. Maybe just
I would
chunk
do
it in half.
But I think a duty roster by name would be helpful.
Okay.
I'm happy to get plugged in wherever needed, George.
Okay. All. Do you guys see anything else for night of tasks that we would need for between 5 and 8? And then we'll discuss after that what we do before and after.
Martini for everybody, of course.
Yeah.
You bring the bottle, Paul.
Okay.
I'll bring the
I'll circulate a duty roster, and everybody can sign up as they want. I think pre 5 o'clock. I think setup, just getting the table, I think we're gonna have a new snazzy voting box, Niles.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Getting the new snazzy voting box set up, getting a backup box set up for if the box fills up, where do we put ballots in the meantime? I know we've got some signs left over from last year, along with, I can't remember if the election plan wound up with the electioneering zone, but we might need to put out some signs. And then the only other set up one is me and at least one witness to sign the certification of the voter roll, and I would imagine at that point print out a copy of the voter roll for whoever is doing the mailing new ballots to. If you have an issue, I think we would want an updated copy of the final voter roll in front of them.
Thank you. Beautiful. I'm right.
So if there's somebody, and I'll put that in the duty roster, if there's somebody who can come down a little early with me to sign it, witness the certification, and help me just print out and initial the voter roll, so that way we've got the official committee copy that's sitting at the table with somebody. And then
You can put me down for early if you want.
okay, excellent. And then the other one is post after 8 o'clock, taking down the table and the signs, and then I want to try and have as many of us as possible there at the end of the evening for opening the box, counting the envelopes as they come out. I think we'll want to not adjudicate, not review, anything like that, just literally just counting, okay, there were 109 envelopes in the thing. We all agree, we all, making note of that, so that way then those go into whatever box we're using to send them up to Electech, seal the box, put the signature tape over the things, so that way we can make sure the box is all squared away. But so I'll include that on the duty roster, but I want to try and have as many of us as possible there for end of the night when we open the box and just count the envelopes, so that way we know exactly how many are going in that box to Electech, so when they get it, they can count and say, yep, we opened the box, there were 109 envelopes in there. Anything else for day of process stuff that people can think of, would like to discuss, want to address? Okay. And I'm sure we can add more to that as we go along. I'll circulate, as Paul described it, I'll circulate a duty roster and a sign-up sheet so everyone can sign up, and we can try and get it all, we can get all the spots squared away and make sure we've got everybody down there who needs, and if we have more volunteers that are necessarily needed at any given moment, I'm happy to bring my book and just sit over on the side, especially if it's a nice evening. Okay. Anything else on May 10th before we move on? Okay, hearing nothing. One other thing I wanted to discuss that wasn't on the agenda, but I had mentioned in the email was we had the email into the box relating to one of the candidate mailers. Niles, I know you spoke with Ron about that and the legal issues. I think ultimately, like in summary, one of the mailers had an issue with it that was self-reported by the candidate. That didn't comply with one of the requirements in the election plan. And it's basically, what do we want to do about it at this point? I can speak for me. I think one of the problems is we don't really have, the plan says these are the requirements, but it doesn't actually establish anything related to enforcement. It doesn't establish anything related to, there's no if then. Anywhere in the plan, anywhere in our authorization as a committee, there's nothing that we refer over. I think the most we can do is just kind of express an opinion as the committee to the candidate about what steps we think might be appropriate, but are not necessarily, none of it seems to be binding. I think it's something that we might want to flag for the council for next year, to include either in the plan or in how they're thinking about the committee, but we don't really have, in my mind, I don't really see anything much that we can do. it's a fairly minor issue that I think Niles and I discussed it briefly, seems to be a legacy of copying over some language from the Maryland state election laws, as opposed to something that necessarily would have created a meaningful impact on this particular circumstance. So I don't know if anyone else on the committee had a chance to review it, had any thoughts, recommendations on what we might want to do at this point.
Probably make some recommendations to the council, right, on contingencies.
Yeah, I think so. And I think like for me, and Niles and I briefly discussed it, I think what seems to make the most sense is encouraging corrective action. So basically, like, okay, make sure any future mailings address this issue. If possible, sending out a kind of a follow-up on the mailing, specifying the information that should have been included in the first mailing, and clarifying that through a follow-up if necessary. But I think, like I said, this one doesn't really cause a big problem for me because I think it was pretty minor. I think it's more of one I can envision where a bigger problem might arise, and we might want to have some established process or guidance on what would happen if there was a more serious violation of these things. Niles, did you have anything else from the conversation with Ron that...
Nope. Ron's,
Okay.
as you mentioned, Ron's view was just, it's a question of asking, hey, or recommending, I guess is the best way of saying, corrective action, and that was the main thing. So.
Okay. Okay. Unless anyone else has anything else, I think it'd be one where, we'll put together some recommendation language for the council on what to do in the future. But unless anyone really wants to raise it as a bigger thing, I think it's one where I think we kind of accept the corrective actions that have already taken and move on to making recommendations on how we're going to address this if it ever came up again. Okay. That was everything on my agenda. Did anyone have anything else they wanted to cover, especially as we head into the home stretch of our election season?
George, is Niles going to coordinate with the shop owners down there, let them know what exactly is happening? I assume that will happen.
Yes. So I had a conversation with a couple already, but yes. So the short answer is yes. We're going to let them know and have a conversation. But yes.
Make sure they have ice cream.
There we go.
Not for everyone, just for the committee. We get all the ice cream.
Right.
Niles, I'm sure once we kind of lock the procedure stuff, I'm sure you and I will probably have a call with. Is Nikki our point person this year? It sounds
yes.
like?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Nikki with Electech, and so we'll have a call with her as well.
And just walk through the process. I think, like I said, last year they were really flexible around any of the stuff we needed, and they were good about, on Zoom, holding the stuff up to the thing for us. They kept good records. We'll keep our own. I think, in addition to the May 10th duty roster, I'll probably put together a quick one for both nights of the vote counting, just so that way we can be keeping and double checking our records on. Last year, we wound up with a good report coming out of it that said, okay, issue 1 dealt with ballot envelope XKG 1043. The issue was this. The committee discussed, the committee voted this way, etc. And I know they kept some separate records for that and then boxed everything up for us at the end pretty well. So I'm sure I'll create a separate duty thing for the 23rd and the 25th for who is helping and who is creating the committee record for that and who is creating the backup committee record for that, so that way we make sure that no issues, no numerical discrepancies, nothing goes anywhere. And yeah, I think if everyone can just take, the last thing I wanted to flag, if everyone can take a quick look. Last year there were no problems with it. It was very smooth and easy, but if anyone wants to make any changes to the process for adjudicating write-in votes, and just making sure that the language as written makes sense, I think that was one specifically where I tried to clarify that language a little bit, but tell me if in trying to clarify I have muddied it, as I've been known to do. So just let me know if that part makes sense. Anything else from committee members?
Do you anticipate a write-in candidacy, and if so, have all the appropriate notifications been met? Confirmations?
I haven't anticipated a write-in candidacy, but I don't think there's we do anything particularly differently other than just for example, so last year what happened was they flagged anything with a write-in, held it up to the camera, said, okay, and committee voted and looked at it and said, okay, I see a write-in for John Doe. Someone motioned committee and says, okay, I agree. We have committee takes a majority thing and says, yes, we're in agreement. That's a vote for so-and-so. And we keep those separately. And then there's a second vote on the write-ins at the end where we said, okay, looking at the full list, we counted 4 write-in votes for John Doe, 2 write-in votes for John Smith, 1 write-in vote for Mickey Mouse, who is ineligible. So therefore, that one will not be recorded. Are we in agreement that those are the correct numbers? And I think the only other one for the write-ins, and we were pretty good about it this year and last year, and especially in 2020, I know they did, this came up a couple of times, and they did a good job of clarifying the language and the messaging, of reminding people throughout the instructions that it is not 3 votes and some write-ins. It is, you your write-ins do count towards your 3 votes total. Anything else from the committee? Okay. So action items, I will circulate duty roster for May 10th, May 23rd, May 25th. Everyone take a look if there's any last edits, changes, anything to the vote counting and curing procedures and the updated election report that we issue. I know Naomi had raised some comments, so I'm sure we'll make a couple of small tweaks and edits and recirculate it and vote over email administratively to pass that over to the council for them to have a chance to take a look at it. And Niles, I will get you final copies of the meeting minutes so that way we can get them posted, and I will circulate after this meeting copies of the minutes from tonight. So those are my action items. And am I missing anything? Okay. Hearing nothing, then it is 8:24. We will move to a second resident comment period. Residents, if you have a comment, please go ahead, raise your hand, or appear on camera, wave your hand, and Niles will get you unmuted. I see Susan has her hand up. Susan Gonzo. Niles, can you unmute her?
Yep, we're there.
Okay, Susan.
Hi, thank you again. So I was going to mention, I guess, what we were talking about before, the vote counting and curing procedures. And if I understood correctly from what you were saying, it sounds like you all are going to send a draft of something you've seen as the committee to the council. And then once the council has it, maybe then residents can see it. Because I guess my question is just a process question. When do we lay eyes on that draft in terms of having an opportunity to have input? Because while some of it just seems like, oh yeah, this was done before and we're just kind of doing the same thing, there really are very substantive topics involved in those the counting and curing procedures. And for me personally, not counting someone's ballot is really disenfranchising someone. So last year we had about 3 or 4 people who were disenfranchised. The committee chose not to count their ballots, and I was really curious why were they not counted. And it took me a long time to figure out that, or it somehow got conveyed that, okay, maybe 2 or 3 of them did not have a signature on the envelope. One of them did not have an envelope. So I understood the not having the envelope, but the other part, it seemed like it could have been made, conveyed to the public, to us earlier. So I think it's really important, whatever tallies you do of every vote and why it's not counted, if we're going to choose to disenfranchise someone, not count their ballot, I think it should be known individually and to the community why that happened. And if possible, I would certainly want, if you've got a control number, you know who it was, and particularly if they didn't sign their ballot like 2 years in a row, you know, what's going on? Like, can we possibly contact the person based on their control number and say, hey, your thing didn't count this year. Just want to make sure you know you really have to sign the, you know, whatever it is. So I guess my comment is please make the tallies as really public so we see all the little details. And I would like, maybe next time, if this is I don't know if this is too late to have input, but I think now is the time for the public, for residents to have input on the nitty-gritty details. It's not really, once it goes to the council, then the council has this meeting where they cover 500 different things, and this committee's one little thing about voting procedures is just a very small part of that. So to me, the time to have the conversation and to look at it and to kind of talk about it is really now, or, you know, it's at the committee level, but I understand that, you know, everyone's busy and such, but I'm just saying in the future, I think it would be wise to let residents see the stuff before you pass it on to the council, just because they're not going to have as much time in a big meeting to talk about that. And then finally, the voter roll. Niles, I don't know how public that is, but for example, I know in our neighborhood, at least one daughter of an older woman has moved in with her. I don't know if that daughter and the older woman is not as with it as she used to be, but she's probably, I mean, she's with it, but I'm just saying she might have the ballot. I'm not sure the daughter does. I'm not sure that you all even know that the daughter lives there. So if I could see that the voter roll, I would know, okay, I know at that address. So I even know, you know, so is there a way for us to see the voter roll?
Yeah, so the short answer is the voter roll is a public document. If you would like to view it, I can send it to you. What we tend not to do is like post it on the website, for example, because it includes people's names and addresses and things like that. But if you would like to look at it, it is a public record and you can review it. So just send me an email, just say, hey, I would like it. A couple of people in the community have already done that. So if you would like to as well, just send me an email and then I'll send it to you. Okay? So I just want to make it clear what, you know, how that process is. Okay?
Thank you. And by the way, when we do talk about the vote counting and curing and all that you're doing, there are so many little details about what gets counted and why, like if there's a signature but there's not an address, and what are you going to do? So there's so many things that I would just kind of be curious how it was all laid out. So that's just a comment for the future. Thank you. Thank you for all the work you all are doing.
Thank you, Susan. And that actually, you raised a point that, as Niles mentioned, the voter roll is a public document. You can reach out to the office if you had questions about that. And also, once again, encouraging everyone, if you have a specific question about you or a member of your household's status on the voter roll, but don't want the full document, you can also reach out to the committee and the village office, and we can check kind of one-offs for you if you had a specific question. But alternatively, yeah, if you want to view the entire voter roll, it's public. It's a public doc and can be sent to you. So thank you, Susan, for bringing that up. That is a very good reminder. And as to your point relating to the reporting figures, I think that was something that was somewhat reflected in the report. That's something that Naomi's comments and that is some good feedback as we finalize what that will look like either in the election report or in other materials where we can potentially release our night of reporting on, okay, these were the decisions the committee made throughout the night related to specific ballots and the deliberative process. So, and that would all be part of the public session, I can also say. So thank you, Susan. Marty, I see you have your hand up. Now, can we mute her?
Is she...
Okay. Hey, everybody. And again, like Susan, I want to commend you. This is like really thorough, down in the weeds work, and I appreciate it very much. Having done it myself for 5 years, I know how much work is involved here, and I want you to know that I really, really am very, very grateful for the detail you're going to. I have a couple of items here. It's kind of hard to have to jump back to what was on the agenda sooner, but first question is, during the ballot adjudication process on the 23rd, or the envelope process on the 23rd and the ballot process on the 25th, how much of that will the candidates be able to see? It wasn't clear to me. You're talking about the public observation, and that's one piece, but the candidates, well, it just wasn't clear. So I don't know if you have an answer to that or can provide an answer by email to me, but I mean, my own take, being a candidate now, is that I would like to see it all. So what's the process of including the candidates to observe the whole session on both nights?
So all of the adjudication decision-making stuff is part of the public session. So the candidates, the public, the committee, all are seeing the same thing. There's no like kind of secret back room where that's happening. The only difference is the candidates or their designated observer. That's more of a function around who will be off mute during that session versus members of the public can't raise objection. Only candidates or the observers can raise objections during that part. But the candidates and everyone will be seeing everything that the committee is seeing, with the possible exception of, and this would be maybe something we would have to discuss, would be basically the getting from Electech on the 23rd the list of the names of people whose ballots are non-conforming and are going into the curing process. Because I think that's would be one that there's a conversation to be had, I think, around whether or not that is just the committee knows the names, or whether or not that's something where we would also have the candidates sitting in on that part. But I did want to try and keep that part non-public, just because at that point you're no longer discussing, during the adjudication portion, you're just discussing this is ballot control envelope number XYZ 123. At the point in which we were getting the list of names, I think that one I wanted to take non-public. But I think that's a point for conversation around if the candidates would be there for when we get that list of names or not.
Okay, but otherwise the candidates will be able to see the whole process.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. That's the answer I hope. I did want to go back to the agenda item that you added, George, about, I don't know what the details were because you didn't specify, but some candidates' mailer did not technically comply with some requirement, and I don't know what requirement. I just want to give you a little past history on that. We did have one year, probably 2017 maybe, I don't remember which year it was, candidates that put out flyers without having a little thing at the bottom that says paid for by the candidate or the candidate team or whatever. And the flyers were by a joint flyer for 2 incumbent carriers, and it caused quite the kerfuffle because there were people in the village, not me, but people in the village who said, well, they used, official village, mailing and official village paper and printing to do this. It looked like, that was the accusation. It was false. The candidates in that case had printed it themselves, but it didn't say so on their flyer. And so it actually did turn into something. A tiny thing, a tiny requirement that has to say that little paid for line on your flyer. It's tiny detail, but it really caused quite the community fuss because people accused those 2 candidates falsely of using village resources to do their flyers. And the election committee, I do remember the part where the election committee clarified that in fact they had paid for it, I believe the candidates showed us their receipts from the printing company. So anyway, but those little requirements about complying with the details of the, mailings and whatever for candidates, can blow up. So that's just, and what we did was exactly what you suggest. The election committee contacted the two candidates and said, we're really sorry, but you need to grab every flyer you still have and write on it that it was paid for by you. And, that was quite a chore. People had to get their friends over because they still had 250 flyers to distribute because the thing blew up as soon as the first ones hit the street. We got complaints that they didn't put their paid for line on it. And so some poor soul sat there for 2 nights and wrote the paid for line on all the flyers. And so we did, in fact, again, like you say, there's no enforcement mechanism, but we strongly suggested that the two candidates take corrective action, and they did. All the candidates, wrote in by hand that they had paid for themselves, and the committee verified that they had, and so peace was restored in the village. But it's interesting how small things can blow up because people here do pay attention to elections. Okay, let's see what else I had here marked.
Before we move on, Marty, thanks for the historical context on that. That's helpful and insightful for someone who was not living in the village at the time. And so thank you for sharing that.
Always glad to help. On the issue that Susan Kahn brought up, I just have to add a pretty strong 2 cents here that I, as a candidate, would really like to see whatever written procedures you're doing for the vote counting. I do consider them substantial regulations, and so I'm a little concerned just procedurally about the committee approving them administratively because, having been grounded in the Open Meetings Act pretty thoroughly, substantial regulatory decisions do need to be made in public meetings. And the process you've set up here leaves me a little confused because, well, first, as Susan said, there's been no opportunity for residents to see these regulations, let alone candidates, and I certainly would like to see them. The second is the larger procedural issue about having, under the Open Meetings Act to make regulatory decisions in public meetings. So if you could address both those points. Number one, how can the candidates and or the public see what you're looking at, what documents you're looking at here, to review them and give you feedback before you send it to the council? Because Susan's right. This is not something that we want to spend an hour at the council meeting discussing. I think it's much more efficient to do it here in the committee level. So first question is, when will we see the drafts and be able, as candidates or residents, to give you our feedback on the procedures? And they are substantive. And second, since they are substantive, we'll have a second meeting, even a brief one, to vote to approve these regulatory procedures that you're talking about tonight on the vote counting process and curing and all that. So 2 questions there.
As for point 1, I think once we, as a committee, circulate and make edits and get them changed, I think at that point they will be available for review once we, as the committee, kind of finish going through them. As for the second one, that starts getting into legal terminology for which I would want to speak with Ron and make sure that I am speaking about it as accurately and concisely as possible on that one. But I can say is so. Yeah, I will defer on that one until we've had the absent kind of being able to consult with him. But I can say once the committee looks them over and agrees that this is what we are agreeing is kind of our draft version, that it will be made available.
Okay, so residents and candidates will have a chance to give you feedback on these fairly important regs before you send them to council. So you might even do a third draft. You're going to do a draft to consolidate what you got today and then circulate that to the committee and then make that public. And then at that point, we get to see it and we can chime in.
So I would say they're not regulations. There's nothing in them they're a restatement of the language in the election plan, basically. It is walking through the process and the language as established by the election plan. It's not creating a new regulation. There's no new guidance. For example, I know Susan had brought up the issue related to ballot curing stuff. That is the language in there related to curing is the language that comes out of the election plan relating to what the criteria are for deeming something non-conforming, and the language relating to what the 24 hours and reasonable effort made by the committee in curing certain classes of non-conforming envelopes.
I did think, George, that your description of how you would reach out to voters tonight at this meeting, to tell people that they messed up their affidavit form and can they fill it out or whatever. I thought that was really helpful tonight, but I haven't seen that in writing, and it's great. It sounds good to me, but I would really like to see that. It's a good procedure. It sounds like, but with elections, it's always in the details, as you've learned to your amusement and/or entertainment. It's really in the details, and so again, I think that erring on the side of caution in terms of enabling community input, and certainly candidates might give you some feedback that would be helpful on this process. Before you send it to the council, it just seems to me like a good, clean process, a good, open community process. And I would encourage you to make it available and have comments before you send it to. Is that what you're planning, to have the community and candidate comments before you send it to the council? Just to clarify.
I'd have to discuss that with the committee. I'm not gonna unilaterally decide on process stuff on that front.
Do committee members have anything to say about that tonight? Because I think it is kind of important to include people's input.
But the policy and procedures that have been passed around make very, very adequate curative measures available.
I believe you, Eric, only we haven't seen them. I truly believe you. I'm sure they're good, but I would like to see them. That's a reasonable request, I think, on behalf of all the candidates and other interested residents.
Well, they're on file in the village office, aren't they, Niles?
No, this document that you're talking about tonight, I looked on the website and it wasn't in a packet for this meeting. I don't know quite what you're looking at.
So, we can discuss how we want to transmit it, or who the public gets. I think there's the question of, there's the plan, what the plan says, and what George is saying is that this document just restates what is in the plan, but certainly we can, if the committee looks it over and is fine with it, we can talk about distributing it to the public and how we want to do that.
Yeah, I'd really appreciate that, because it's all in the details, and I'm sure it is good. From the description tonight, it sounded good. But, it builds community trust and confidence if people can see it for themselves, especially the candidates. Because this is, as Susan Kahn said earlier, this has been an issue in the past. And people can be disenfranchised by these rules, these technicalities. And, to me, the right to vote is pretty sacred. So anything like this that could affect people's right to vote, I would encourage you to get community input on, just as a matter of good government process. It builds confidence and trust. And Eric, I take your point. I'm sure they're great, but people need to see that to believe that. Forgive our skepticism. I would love to, see this and just say, bravo, looks great to me. And I hope I will do that. But I have to have an opportunity to see the documents. So, Niles, sooner rather than later?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, and George, before it goes to the council officially, please provide some reasonable opportunity for community input.
All right, thanks, Marty. Susan, is that a new hand up?
Yeah. Just, I'm asking her to unmute, so just give me a second.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
So I guess I was just thinking that the overall why of the committee is for me, just looking from the outside on a simple level, is that you're there to count the votes of people and make sure candidates run and all this kind of thing. It's a fair election, and this is kind of a simple point, but I just wanted to say that I see your job a little bit as voter education. When people kind of go off track, when they, the train kind of jumps off the tracks and they don't get their ballot counted because of not signing the outside of the envelope or something like that. And to me, the job is half done if you get to the point where there's some ballots that don't get counted. And it's okay, we can say, okay, those people got disenfranchised this year because they made this choice based on our rule. But if we don't have some subsequent step where we then try to contact the few people who haven't voted, the way they should, they didn't read the thing, we don't know why they didn't, whatever, or they didn't process it or it didn't happen. If we don't try to reach out to them, I feel like that's where the job's half done of your committee, of the overall raison d'etre of counting the votes of the people and getting the will of the voters and all that. And I know it's a very small thing. There were only maybe 3 votes that didn't count last year, something like that. But I think it's a missed opportunity if you don't try to have some little step in your procedures that say, if somebody didn't sign the outside of the envelope, we will take, even if you want to leave it open-ended, George, with the language, we will take reasonable steps to contact them to clarify that this year it didn't happen, that their vote didn't count because we've set up this rule that this and this have to happen. I think that's just a better way of thinking of it as your own responsibility, that it was kind of if the person failed to do that on the envelope, there was also a failure on the part of the committee to reach them to make sure it didn't happen again, if that's not included. So that's why I just want to say we could go from the punitive model of your vote's not going to count because your ballot is non-conforming, as though you did something wrong inherently in your envelope signing, to a kind of restorative justice thing, a restorative, you're part of the community again, we will count your vote. We want to make you understand this is what you need to do to make sure it counts next time. It was the stuff was splattered all over the place. We couldn't read this, blah, blah, or whatever, or it didn't get in on time. It was 1 day late. And that's helpful to know too. I'd like to know how many ballots come in 1 day late, how many 4 days, that just gives us important information for the future also. So anyway, it's not to be punitive about what you all yourselves are doing, but I just, I think if we start with the mindset from the outset that we're here to educate the voters, we're here to help make sure we get their votes counted. It's kind of a failure or a sadness when it doesn't count. And what can we do to make that better? I just think that's a good starting point for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Are there any other resident comments? Okay. Hearing none, that concludes our committee business. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I so moved, George.
Thank you, Paul. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Good job, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay, I'm just going to end the meeting for all, so you don't have to do anything on your end.
Perfect. Thanks, Niles.
Thank you.